one of my childhood heroes, and I still believe remains one of the funniest men I've ever seen. Many of you won't have heard of him, but if you're a northerner and over 40, you remember the man who was billed as the stage and screen's most famous comedian. In the 40s and 50s, Frank Randle became a film star. He was even immortalized as a cartoon character in Film Fun. I was a lad in Blackpool serving in a department store when Frank was a star. I was pretty then, wasn't I? I haven't changed much now. Blackpool was always a great centre of entertainment. All the stars came for the summer seasons, and Frank was the biggest crowd puller. I'd go to see his shows, 1 and 6 in the stalls it was. He'd come on stage with his drawn beard, his boots on the wrong feet, and he'd hold the audience in the palm of his hand for as long as he liked. Frank was the undisputed king of variety. And when it came to films, well, all they had to do was to point a camera at him and he'd fill cinemas. I really believe he was more popular than Valentino. He could succeed by just being himself, but it wasn't always like that. Randle made his name as a great character comic. When he came on stage, he would entertain the audience in various disguises. People would queue for hours to see him as the old boatman, any more for sailing, round the bay and back in time for tea, or as Grandpa, by gum, she's a hot 'un, and the drunken hiker. Why, I've supped some stuff tonight. Oh, the grand fellow, my dad, though. He was 95 when he went. Should be there by now. He got married when he was my age. Yes. Nice girl, 18 she was. Well, she wanted a baby, you see. He went to the doctor, he said, how do I stand? He said, it's a miracle. He said, well, I've got this young wife, she wants a baby, what shall I do? He said, well, you better get a lodger. You know, 2 months later, there was a baby on the way. He was just thrilled by that. He went dashing back to the doctor. He said, hey, my wife's having a baby. He said, did he get a lodger? He said, aye, and I think she doesn't want to know. As you guessed, that wasn't Randle, that was me. I admired him so much that I modelled an act on one of his characters. Somehow, Frank touched the spirit of the industrial North. All those belches and breaking of wind would reduce prim Lancashire matrons to helpless laughter, although when they left the theatre, they blushed and said to their husbands, that Frank Randle, he goes far too far. The men would identify with a twinkling drunkard who had answer to everything and everyone. Neither Randle the comedian nor Randle the man had much time for authority. He was the rebel, the anarchist who destroyed all institutions. He was absolutely determined to topple authority. Anarchy has always been the inspiration for British comedy. Frank Randle was born in Wigan in 1901. Most Wigan lads ended up down pit or in mill, but Frank was determined to go on the stage. And at the age of 15, he moved to Blackpool. But his only ambition was to get into show business and on the stage. Off stage, he was immaculate to the point of vanity, and at the height of his fame, he could command £1,000 a week. He owned a large house, a yacht, various sports cars, which he'd drive at 90 miles an hour with a crate of stout under the seat. Downing several pints of stout was no problem to Frank. But if you had to work with him, well, that was a different story. After a stage show, he'd keep the entire company drinking till 4 in the morning. While he was making films, he'd disappear on a bender for 3 days and then return to a waiting film crew as though nothing had happened. Randle became a familiar figure at Blackpool Magistrates' Court, accused many times of drunken driving. His defences were like a stage performance, with the jury and the judge cast in the supporting roles. Frank Randle was unpredictable, on and off the stage. He'd arrive at the Garrick Theatre once in Southport, only to be told that the Star's dressing room was not available. So he said, no Star dressing room, no Star, and settled himself into a nearby hotel for a week's drinking. Everyone held their breath when Frank appeared. What would Blackpool's most famous resident do next? He set out to insult everybody in authority, from London managements to the mayor of Blackpool. There wasn't much love lost between Frank and the upper classes. He'd no time for the toffs and their genteel ladies. You'd think Frank didn't care much for women, but there was one woman he idolized, his wife Queenie. He met her early in his career when he was fifth comic and she was a soprano in Annie Humber's Moments of Melody. Queenie was a Londoner. She had class, moved gracefully, dressed beautifully. She was Frank's ideal woman. He showered her with jewellery fit for a queen. But it wasn't what you'd call a happy marriage. Frank was madly jealous.
Queenie was virtually kept a prisoner in their palatial home, but she never complained. Although a moral tyrant at home, on stage Frank was lewd, and his humour became more blue as he got older. In his famous Cinderella sketch, where he played buttons to a man in drag playing Cinderella, he'd thrust his hand up her skirt and say, "Let's get to the point." He was constantly in trouble with the watch committee, who kept an eye on what went on in theatres. Once the police warned Frank against saying a certain line on stage. When the time came, he turned to the audience and said,
"At this point, I'm supposed to say, Cinders, I've come to cut your water off, but the buggers won't let me."
After a series of fines for obscenity, Frank was banned from the Opera House, Blackpool, for a season. In court, Jack Taylor, producer, stood up for Randle's defence. "It's because of the ability of these men to say simple things in a curious way that they're able to obtain these gigantic salaries. I told Mr. Randle not to kiss that nude figure painted on the back cloth." The audience came back for more. They identified with his vulgarity. The old man was also a cheeky boy living out his second childhood. Another star of Mancunian pictures was George Formby, but his success was not limited to the north. Formby, also born in Wigan, had won the London audiences as a naive northern bumpkin. Frank once shared the bill with George Formby in King Fun in Blackpool. They were completely different in temperament and talent, but Frank really wanted a crack at the West End. His approach was quite different to Formby's. On the opening night at the Adelphi Theatre, Frank appeared smartly dressed, very West End. He walked onto the stage, said, "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen." Then on cue, a lady walked on carrying a velvet cushion. Frank took out his teeth, placed them on the cushion, and carried on. He was not a success. The critics said he lacked polish, to which Frank would probably have used one of his old well-worn lines, "What do you think I am, a coffin?" Although loved in London suburbs, from Shepherd's Bush to Edgware Road, the West End rejected the northerner who wanted to take the south by storm. So Frank returned to the north, where he was understood, and poked fun at the snooty London habits. Supreme arrogance is part of a talent like Frank Randle's. On stage he was king of his kingdom, and only his laws applied. It was important to be a star, to know that you had the magic the audience loved. On film, Frank's selfishness is funny. Off-screen, he could be frightening. He was almost schizophrenic. His moods changed so rapidly you couldn't keep up with him. If Frank didn't feel like it, he wouldn't turn up at the theatre. His unpunctuality began to worry managers, and they were wary of employing him. Frank tried to win them back with a show called I'm a Good Boy Now, but no one quite believed it. His theatre audiences dwindled. After all, they could be sure of seeing him on the screen. In the late 50s, he saw more stout than he did theatres. He was dogged by ill health and financial crisis. £49,000 went to the taxman, and the mansion had to be sold. In 1957, he collapsed on stage in Blackpool and died a few weeks later. No more Randle's scandals, no more Randle. Thank goodness he made some pictures, though. And as far as I'm concerned, he's still making us laugh. Good night.
I've just passed a couple of tarts on the road yonder. They were a couple of hot uns. One went like this here to me. I took no notice, much. I said to her, not today, love. I'd rather have a Kensington.